Hello and welcome to Investors Platform. Today's guest is a serial entrepreneur, chairman of Gusto Group, holding sustainable development, construction and architectural companies alongside other companies such as factories and online education based in the village that I was actually born and raised, Colligan. Thanks for being on today, Steff.
It's good to be on it, and looking forward to the chat, Joe.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack in this podcast, but the first area I'd like to dive in is, where did it all begin? Did you always have the vision of becoming a serial entrepreneur?
In a bit of a geeky way, I think the answer to that is yes. I've always had in my head that I would at one stage uh, be running a group of companies, and I think I've always had lots of ideas, and I've always had an enthusiasm for business and an interest in business, and so yeah, when you sit there and visualize as a youngster where you're going to end up, I've always felt that that was my destiny. But you don't really plan that. You just have an idea. You probably see other people doing things, and you think, "Yeah, I could. Yeah, I could do that. I'd like to do that. I'd like to sit at that level within a company and be a bit strategic about the way the company's going to go, and come up with new ideas for a company." I worked in a factory, so one of my first proper jobs, one of my first ever jobs, was working in a chicken factory, packing eggs down the road at Girton. You probably know the village.
Yeah.
So I did that when I was at college, doing a building. Well, no, when I was first at college, I was working weekends at the chicken factory, and then the first job I had as a 5-day-a-week job was working in a factory in Newark, which was called RHP. You're probably aware of RHP. I think it was since called. I can't remember what it's called now, but it's a ball bearing factory, made bearings for all sorts for the automotive industry, and I was working in the grindery there. And having worked there as a feeder in feeding a machine, which is absolutely the base level job for anybody working in the factory, I was coming up with ideas as to how they could make the process better. And I was pushing these ideas forward. So I was this young 17-year-old kid working in a factory, talking to the bosses, saying, if you did this differently, if we did this differently. And they're all looking at me, shaking their head, thinking, who's this kid? Just get on with your job, mate. And I applied for a management trainee position within the factory. And my girlfriend, who is now my wife, been together a very, very long time, she was working in the personnel department. And the personnel manager said to her, we've had one of the lads from factory floors applied for this job. We'll have to give him an interview, but obviously he's not going to be suitable. she didn't have the courage to say, actually, that's my boyfriend.
Yeah.
So I got the interview and didn't get the job, and that at that point decided that working for somebody wasn't for me. I needed to start to do it all on my own, and that was at the point really. I left the job after 6 months working in a factory. The guy who was my machine operator at the time said to me, "Why are you leaving this?" He said, "If you stick here," he said, "you'll have my job when I retire." And that sent a shiver right the way through my body, as if to say, no, that's not what I want. So I left there, went and did a building diploma. I was doing my DJing. I'd saved up a bit of money working at the factory to buy some DJ equipment. Went off DJing 3 or 4 nights a week. And that was my first real business on my own, was setting up as a mobile DJ. And while I was doing that, I was doing my building diploma. And since then, I never worked for anybody else again. So that was it. That was my experience of being employed.
Excellent. And so that first property that you actually bought, did you buy that for yourself and then renovated it, and with all your expertise that you got from your college diploma?
Yeah, so I started doing job in building work, and then after I'd started to make a little bit of money doing job in building work, I worked out that it'd be quite good to buy a property. So this was back in the day, Joe, when you could walk into the bank and have a relationship with the bank manager. You know, there was a door there you could knock on. It's the bank manager. You walk in there. I'd got scribbled down on a bit of paper my business plan for this property to split it into 3 flats, and sold 2 of the flats and retained 1 of the flats. And amazingly, he agreed to it and said, "Yeah, okay, we're happy to fund that." And that was it. I'd got no experience in development. I'd got very limited experience in construction, but I knew a lot of lads. A lot of my mates were, you know, tradesmen. So it was like, okay, come on, lads. I hadn't got a business as such. I wasn't registered as a limited company, I think, at the time, just a sole trader. So that was it. We went down there, bought the place, did 2 of the flats up, and effectively the profit was the 3rd 1-bedroom apartment. And I moved into that 1-bedroom apartment. And then, having done that, I bought another property in the village, split that into 3, did a similar thing, and that was the sort of start of becoming to understand the development sector.
It's interesting because what you're saying right there is where a lot of the people that are listening to this podcast are at currently, and you know, now you're now turning over 25 million with all your companies and stuff. So it's really inspirational to hear how you've done it from scratch by yourself and gone on to scale the company that you've got today. So the Gusto Group, where did that start and how did you kind of found that originally?
Well, the name was my DJ name was Dr. Gusto. When I decided to set a construction company up, I just had become quite attached to the name Gusto, so we decided to call it Gusto Construction. And it just evolved. I mean, doing those first properties, and then doing a larger development that had some new build in it as well, was really just the start of it, and it just evolved over a period of time. It wasn't me sitting down one day and writing a business plan and saying, right, this is how I'm going to do it. At that stage, I didn't even know what a business plan was. Nobody had ever given me any formal education on how you set up a business, how you do anything. It was really making up as you go along. And to a certain extent, I think that's what everybody should do, because the trouble is if you have to sort of sit down and work out your full business plan before you do something, it's all too daunting. You're sitting down there looking at something, and then you've got to make the leap of faith to actually then deliver that business plan. And quite a lot of people won't do anything until they've got the whole journey worked out. And you'll never work the whole journey out. You've just got to start doing it. Take a little bit of risk, take a bit more risk, then you suddenly start, working out the best way to do things. Yeah, it's good to have a vision in your head. So during all this time, I've still got a vision in my head that one day I'm going to have a larger business and lots of things going on in business. But, you then have to deal with the day-to-day of, right, what are we doing today?
Yeah. And so just quickly on the start of it, were you funding all these deals for yourself, or did you get partners in when you first started out?
No, it was all bank funded. So back in the day, the banks were far more supportive in some ways of the development sector. I bought from a I went to Australia for a period of time, and when I got back from Australia, I went to auction and bought a property from auction, and then went back to the bank to try to get funding from it. So I basically put a deposit down at auction for a property and went to the bank, and the bank said, "Oh, the market's changed quite a bit. I don't know if we're going to be able to fund this," and it left me with a very uncomfortable few days, worrying that I'd paid the deposit for a site that I wasn't actually going to be able to find the funds to complete on the purchase. And in the end, the bank did fund it. And I think gradually over time, bank funding has become more and more difficult to get, especially if you're a startup. So it was a very different world back in those days. I think it's far more difficult for people nowadays. But there, we funded it all through growth. And I've always ploughed all the money back into the company. I think that's one thing I've never done. I've never taken much money out of the business. I've lived in a fairly frugal way. I don't live in a massive house. I don't. I have a lot of assets within the business, but every penny I've always had has been left in the business. And I think that is the right way to grow your business. People that suddenly start to see a little bit of cash coming in the business and get the flash cars and start living a lifestyle that is way beyond the reality of where their business is at that time are usually the ones that come unstuck. I think the people that do start off and plough their money back in, are building a better foundation for the future growth of the company.
Sure. And so were you always a trader? So were you always looking to sell the properties on the back of them, or are you looking to hold some of the assets back?
No, we own a few properties now, but not sort of massively intentionally. It is more about we develop and sell property rather than build to rent. Cool.
So this is something that I really wanted to touch on. So the importance of sustainability within development, and obviously you're living proof that you can actually do these massive sites, 150, I think it's 150 plots, 150 houses in one plot with completely sustainable housing. Where did all that begin? Where did that what was the origin behind the sustainable development within your company?
Well, so back in the early 90s was when an event called the Rio Summit, which is the start of what they now call the COP events. So it's like a global meeting to discuss the issues around climate change. And that started in the early 90s. And I got interested in it. So I started to hear the language of sustainability. Before that, I hadn't really ever thought about it too much. And so that language started to be talked about, and I got interested in it. And I think partly back in the day, I used to get back late at night doing my discos, and the BBC used to have their open university programs. They used to play late at night, so there was a lot of academic discussions around sustainability, and they used to get quite interested in them. So in the mid-90s, there was a lot more talk locally about, and within Nottinghamshire County Council, about the need to transition to new technologies, new low carbon homes. And so I thought, well, hang on, there's a business opportunity here. So I'd got a site for 20 houses, which I was just going through the purchase of. There was an amount of money that needed to be paid from that site to the council in terms of an uplift in value. So I went to the council and said, look, I could build really sustainable houses on this site. I could do something really groundbreaking, but it's going to cost me a lot more money to do it. You're talking about wanting to see better housing and new technologies coming through. Why don't you support me on this by not charging that uplift? And the council were quite receptive to having that conversation with me. So that gave me a bit of confidence about looking at new technology. So I spent 6 months I went around Europe, I looked at all the new technologies, looked at rainwater harvesting, looked at solar thermal, looked at high levels of insulation, looked at new types of glazing. So new stuff that wasn't really mainstream at all in the UK, but was starting to be a bit more mainstream in Europe. And then made the decision that that's what we were going to do. We were going to do something very different on this side. The frustrating thing was that the council then backed away and weren't prepared to give me any financial benefit at all on it. So I then got a difficult decision to make. Do I carry on down this route? I know it will cost me more to build, or do I pull the pin and just do a standard building regs construction on the site? And I decided to go down the sustainability route. And fortunately, the market was quite buoyant, and we were able to sell well into the market. And we'd have probably made more money just doing standard construction, but it opened up new opportunities for me in understanding technologies. The trouble is with the housing, with the mainstream house building sector, is that we all build down to the minimum standard. So there's very, very few examples of anybody that's pushing the boundaries at all, because it just doesn't happen. Because commercially, it's difficult to do it. And so nobody's learning, nobody's getting experience of doing things differently, because they just build down to the minimum standard, because that's the cost model, that's the way the housing market works. So the fact that we have been pushing the boundaries, it means we've learned a lot as a company. We've got a lot more knowledge than other people have got. And as that market starts to open up, that should create more business opportunities for us. Unfortunately, over the last sort of 10 or 12 years, the government hasn't really pushed this agenda forward. I'm hoping that it is going to become more mainstream over the next few years.
Yeah, it'd be good to talk about that side of things in a moment, but I'd like to dive into a bit of like your knowledge behind the sustainable technologies that are available and what you can actually implement today in this market. I know you do a lot with solar and heat ventilation and airtight pressure and that sort of thing. Would you be able to just discuss a bit about what you actually implement in your developments going forward and what you've already done?
Well, we do different things on different sites. We still have to make it work commercially, because if it doesn't work commercially, we can't make a profit, and if we don't make a profit, we haven't got a business. So we've always had to try to find a balance as to how much additional costs we incur by pushing the standards higher, and the commercial viability of a site. So I've built with different construction methods. We've built with timber frame. I've built with ICF construction, which is insulated concrete formwork, which is building with like polystyrene blocks, filling it in with concrete. That's a really good way to build in lots of ways. You get a very efficient, airtight house out of it. The property I live in is built out of ICF, however, uses a lot of concrete. Concrete has got a big carbon footprint attached to it, so there's lots of negativity about building with concrete. I'm an investor in a company called Hemspan. Hemspan are developing a range of building materials made of hemp that lock up lots of carbon within the materials. As hemp grows, it locks up a lot of carbon in the hemp and back into the earth. And so you could actually start to build carbon negative buildings, that actually lock carbon up rather than emit a lot of carbon in terms of the building materials you're using. Obviously, solar, back in the day, when we did our first development in the 90s, solar PV really wasn't a thing. Solar thermal, where you're actually heating the water up on the roof, was, and so we put a lot of solar thermal on those houses. We now tend to not do solar thermal. We tend to do PV, generating electricity on the roofs. Rainwater harvesting is something that sort of grew well during the late 90s, early 2000s. There was a bit more legislation trying to drive rainwater harvesting, and we built a company off the back of it, so called Free Rain. We built it. We got to about £1 million turnover with it, and then I ended up buying a plastics business off the back of that. So these things take me as an entrepreneur down different routes. and so we know a lot about a lot of these technologies. We know what works. We've got people living in houses that with these technologies that have been living with them for 10, 15 years or more. So we're well positioned as a company to have the knowledge to scale, and that's where we are as a company at the moment. We're now looking at that next sort of scale up of our whole business, and basically with that expertise and experience that we've got behind us, because we've done it, we've been there and we've done it where others haven't.
Have you find that with the new innovative housing rather than traditional developments, that you're able to market it to people and they're more interested in these houses because they are, they cost less to run, for example, and they're better for the environment?
To a certain extent, but the trouble is with housing is that it's also all about location and price. So the housing market doesn't really add a premium to higher performing properties to a certain extent. The mortgage lenders tend to value on square footage rather than on specification. So you do have to ensure that your marketing is good and that you're able to sell the benefits of what you're doing and try to get an advantage over your competitors through that. But you still, if you think about selling a car, somebody wants to buy a car of a higher specification, then there's a market of people that want to buy that car. When you buy a house, it is in the particular location that your house is being built. So if somebody doesn't have a need to move to that location, then there might be a market of people that want to buy an eco home, but they don't want to buy it in that particular location. So you've still got a fairly difficult market to sell in. You haven't got, it's not a movable product, if you see what I mean. It's a fixed location with a fixed amount of bedrooms. You start to narrow the market very much down. But I think over the last few years, especially with the spike in energy costs, I think there is now far more understanding of the benefits of a low energy home over an expensive, badly built property.
I'd be interested to know about your thoughts when you originally started on the project right next to the train station in Collingham, your risk management behind that, and what went into mitigating the risk and, de-risking your project, essentially.
Well, that site is quite a decent sized site. We've built about 200 houses on the site. When we finish, we're literally just finishing off the last few bungalows at the moment, and then that site's finished. We actually de-risked it slightly by selling 40 plots to another developer. So it was quite a big site for us. Previous to this site, we'd probably done sites of 50 houses, but not 200. Actually, having done 200 houses on a site, it's no more difficult. In fact, it's easier to do larger sites than it is to do smaller sites, because you've just got one setup on the site and you just continue to run through the site. So big isn't necessarily more difficult. Lots of little sites is probably more difficult than doing one big site. However, you've obviously got to the numbers get bigger on a big site.
Of course.
And so therefore you've got to be able to manage the cash flow on a large site. So what we did is I did a deal with another developer. They took 40 plots on the site and built those out. So that helped to a certain extent in terms of the overall cash flow of the site.
Just before we move on to the next section, I'd be interested to learn a bit more about how you kind of secured the site, how, the relationship you had with the landowner originally, and the funding behind it all in terms of, building it out.
Well, I bought the site in the late 90s. So it's a site a piece of speculative land that I'd bought. And it took 15 years to get planning on it.
Jesus.
So these things don't happen quickly. You know, if you're buying strategic land, then you're not going to get a turnaround on it quickly. The beauty is, if you buy strategic land, there's a big upside to it once you do get planning on it. Yeah, as a developer, you need to have some strategic land, or you need to be partnering with landowners. But you also need to keep feeding your machine once you start to get to a decent size as a company. So you need to be able to move on to some more immediate sites that have got planning as well. So it was a long-term speculative purchase, really. I bought this site, 22 acres of land next to the railway station. I bought the house next door to it as well. I lived in the house for a while. I immediately built 5 houses around the back of the main house that we bought, and put our builder's yard into the yard of the house. So it was quite a nice setup for us as a company to be able to be a mix of somewhere for me to live, bring up the family. Family were quite young at that stage. We've got some land that we can quickly build a few houses on. We've brought a little bit of money back in. And then we knew all the time that it was going to be a bit more of a long-term game in terms of getting planning on the land. But
it might be worth mentioning on the podcast, if people are listening, before Steff and Jerome developed on the land, the 22 acres. I actually used to work on site before it was a development with the pigs on the farm on my Saturdays. So that's one for you.
yeah, like Bo the pig. Yeah,
that's it.
Yeah. And you know what? I'll mention this to you, but not a lot of people know this. So when we came up with the name, because we've got a retirement development on the site, we did in fact total, I think it's about 90 retirement properties as part of the overall development, and we've called the main apartment block, retirement block, Bowfield House.
Excellent.
And Bowfield is a French word, means beautiful, but Bow is actually the pig.
Yeah.
You remember the pig? There was a pig called
Bow. Of course, yeah. Collected his shit. Yeah, so the next section, Steff, the current market. Obviously, we've just got a new government in state. They've brought out a new NPPF. Can you see any challenges or opportunities in the next couple of years, or is it too early to tell at the moment?
I think the new government's got some ambitious targets in terms of their house building targets. They obviously, we need, as a country, we need more homes. The trouble is there's lots of hurdles to overcome to start delivering up to 300,000 houses a year, which is the target they've set themselves. So I think the starting point is the right starting point, in that there's ambition from this government to ramp up the number of houses that are going to be built. I think there's an underlying ambition from the government to build to higher performance standards. The reality of delivering that is where the problems are going to start to occur, because the planning system has got so many issues within it in terms of the speed of getting planning through and the resistance to development. The whole build cost profitability model is out of kilter at the moment in areas like Lincolnshire and North Nottinghamshire, where property values are relatively low. Build costs have gone up massively during the COVID period. This period of inflation has seen build costs rise, and then if local authorities are also wanting to extract value out of those new developments for affordable housing, for other Section 106 payments, then the viability of lots of sites that we're looking at the moment don't work. So effectively, the whole thing's gone out of the model isn't working at the moment for us locally here. And so I think local authorities are going to have to take a far more pragmatic approach to what they can get out of a development in terms of affordable housing. It's going to have to be funded in another way in areas like this. If you're talking about the southeast, where property prices are twice or three times the levels that we're seeing here, then of course that their increase in build cost is only slightly more than ours. A brick, a block, a piece of plasterboard costs the same in Lincolnshire as it does in London. The labour costs might be slightly higher in London. So they might cost slightly more to build properties in London, but in proportion to what you're selling properties for in London and what you're selling properties for here, there's a massive difference. So developments in the southeast will be able to deliver lots of other social benefits, which is effectively what they do through the Section 106. In this area here, it's going to be harder for that to happen. And unless there's a reality check around all that, then the government won't be able to start to speed up the build process because it isn't viable in a lot of places.
Especially for the way that you develop sustainably, right? Because your cost will be a lot more than just a traditional builder, for example, where they'll, like you say, just go for the minimum building reg sort of thing.
Yeah. And so what we do is we negotiate with planners. So I'm just about to start a site at Easthorpe, near a village near Bottisford, near Grantham, in Grantham and Nottingham, in the Vale of Belvoir. Lovely little place. We're building about 40 houses on the site there, just literally started work on the site as we speak. Now, what we've done on that site is we've committed to build to a building standard called the AECB standard, which is the Association of Environmentally Conscious Builders standard. It's a bit like Passive House, but it's not as extreme as Passive House. So we've agreed with the council that that's what we want to do. We want to build to that higher standard, which is way above the building regulations. Now, that's going to cost us more money to do it. So as part of that negotiation with the planners, we have agreed that we're not going to deliver any affordable housing on that site because actually they've got a lot of other development going around in the area and they'd actually got enough affordable housing within that location and didn't require affordable housing necessarily to be delivered from this site. So as part of our negotiation, we said, well, if you want examples of developments that are built to a much higher standard that you can then share the knowledge with other developers, allow us to be at the front end, learning, showing how we can do this, and then sharing that knowledge, then you need to encourage us to do that. And here's an opportunity for you to encourage us to do that, because you're saying to us that you don't necessarily need affordable housing in that location. Yes, we could pay you a commuted sum, you could use that somewhere else, but why not allow us to be the trailblazers? And that's what, in the end, through a very painful planning process, we've ended up with, and we're just about to start on site there. So they'll all be triple glazed houses. They'll obviously be electrically heated. They'll have increased levels of insulation. The houses will perform much better than standard building regulations.
How do you think that the new government is placed for pushing sustainable development, and do you think it's even on their radar at all? I know you've spoken a bit about carbon taxing, for example, to make more carbon intense products more expensive.
Well, the government is very aware of the science around global warming. It is, the science around it is not something that is a discussion and people have a view on it one way or the other. The science is the science. the fossil fuel industry tries to distort the science because they made a decision many, many years ago when they started to understand the science. And some very large corporations around the world have decided to use similar tactics to the tactics that were used by the tobacco industry when suddenly the science proved that smoking cigarettes was not good for you, including the tobacco industry understanding that. Then they sat round the table and decided, well, okay, we know it's not good for you, but we obviously don't want to slow down the growth of our sector. So we've got to find a way to put misinformation out there to enable us to continue to operate. And those decisions were made back in the 1960s by the fossil fuel industry and have been continuing ever since. So the science is clear that we need to reduce down to what is described as net zero in terms of our carbon emissions. And in reality, we need to start to take carbon back out of the atmosphere, because we've got to get to a point where we don't hit these trigger points in terms of the escalation of emissions. So once emissions go over, once global average temperatures start to rise over 1.5 degrees, which is very much where we are at the moment, and all of a sudden you get to these tipping points where you're getting where the glaciers start to melt, where you've got far more emissions being released out of areas of frozen land. So we're at quite a dangerous point, really. So we have to start taking this seriously. We can't just think it's a problem that the next generation are going to deal with. And so what we need to do is we need to look at new technologies and different ways of doing things. Now, what that means is we need to change. It doesn't mean we stop building houses. It means we start building houses in different ways. We start looking at new technologies. And actually, from a business point of view and from a UK point of view, it gives us an opportunity to lead the world, and because we are quite an innovative group of people. There's lots of businesses out there that are coming up with new ideas and new solutions. So the opportunity to build houses in a different way, in ways I was talking about the Hemspan company that is developing building materials made of hemp. There's lots of natural building materials that will lock up carbon, and we need to very quickly start to incorporate those within the mainstream building industry. Now, the trouble is, at the moment, it costs a lot more for that type of building product. It's far cheaper to buy a concrete block, a brick, and insulation that's effectively made of oil. Any plastic insulation is made from oil. So the supply chain on all the materials that are available at the moment that are carbon intensive is cheap because it's a volume supply chain. So somehow we've got to move away from that, and we've got to make these new products more affordable. So you can do that through carbon taxing, because if you've got new products that are coming through that don't have a heavy carbon footprint, and you carbon tax the ones that have got a heavy carbon footprint, you're going to put the cost of those up. Now, overall, for a period of time, that's going to put up the cost of building. So the government have then got to make a decision as to how much importance they're putting on the other things that they're generating money from out of new development. And so we go back to what we talked about, delivering affordable housing. Perhaps that needs to be funded in a different way, because we can't expect new developments to totally fund the future of affordable housing. So I haven't got the full answer to you because I'm not sitting around the cabinet table in government, but I believe that this government understands the issues. I believe this government is trying to engage with entrepreneurs and people that have got solutions, and I hope that they won't be road railed by the lobbyists who have been very successful in lobbying the last government just to maintain business as usual. So, you know, the fossil fuel lobby, the housing lobby have been very effective at persuading the government that you shouldn't put up building regs, you shouldn't be pushing for higher standards because it will cost us more as an industry and therefore you won't get so many houses. You know, that is true to a certain extent, but there are other ways to reach the right outcome where we do get the amount of houses we need, but we also start delivering better houses that have a lower impact on the environment and also encourages innovation. And if we can get that innovation through and we can be leaders, then the UK can start to export that technology worldwide. So, you know, we're not doing ourselves any favours in the long term by not innovating because we're just working with old technologies that are going to die out at some stage anyway.
And so I mentioned it before with you owning a factory. Are you looking at innovating other technologies in terms of, you know, sustainability through your factories?
Well, the factory I own is it was a business I bought out of administration. They got into financial problems, and it was when I was doing the rainwater harvesting. They were making my rainwater harvesting tanks. So it's not a factory that I bought to necessarily make products for the housing sector. So one of our biggest customers is actually a company called RS Sailing. We make all the sailing dinghies for them that go all the way around the world. So we make sailing dinghies, we make furniture for hospitals and prisons, we make oil storage tanks, we make road bollards, we're making giant flotation buoys for offshore wind turbines to carry the cables back. Now they're starting to put wind turbines further and further out to sea. Obviously the cables are floating, and so we make these massive flotation buoys. We're just starting to work with Octopus Energy to make the casings for their air source heat pumps. So we're making numerous different products for all sorts of different sectors. We're a specialist rotational moulder, so we're very good at what we do around a certain type of manufacturing, rather than being a specialist in making a product of our own. We're making products right. So that's what we do. Now, what we're doing as a company is we use quite a lot of energy in terms of the manufacturing process. So we're doing a lot of innovation in terms of our own manufacturing process to cut our energy costs or our emissions by up to 80% through a new type of technology we're developing. And so it's not really making products for the housing sector, it's making a different range of products for a lot of other sectors, and then what we're focused on is how can we make those products in a more energy efficient way, and then we're looking at bioplastics, so we can eventually start to transition away from fossil fuel derived plastics. So it's the same mindset that I've got within construction. You know, in some ways I operate in some old dirty sectors. You know, construction and manufacturing are dirty sectors, but we're trying to innovate in those sectors, and there's a lot of business opportunities that we think will come out of that.
James, part of your PR team, mentioned that you're looking to become a B Corp. and I've done a bit of research behind that as well before this podcast. But it's doing the research. I've never actually heard of anyone changing the company structure and becoming a B corporation. What is the reason behind that?
Well, we are a B Corp.
Oh, you are? Oh, excellent.
In January of this year. So we're one of the first construction and manufacturing companies to get a B Corp certification. To be a B Corp, you have to align your business with the principles of people, planet, and profit. So it's for B Corp is an accreditation for companies that want to really be serious about locking in their focus on their people, the communities with which they interact, with their impact on the environment and the planet, but also are profit-driven organisations. So we're a company, we need to make money. If we don't make money, we can't continue to reinvest and move the business forward. So yes, it's a growing movement. There's about 2,500 B Corps now in the UK. There's about 10,000 worldwide. If you add up the turnover of all those, you're into the many, many billions of pounds of turnover. And the idea is that B Corps start to work together more with each other. So you become part of each other's supply chains. And then we're starting to see local authorities, the NHS, quite a few large companies saying, actually, we want to start to prioritise working with B Corps, because we know the pain they've gone through to become accredited. They've had to really relook at their whole business and make sure their whole business is thinking through all the decisions they make through the filter of people, planet, and profit, rather than just through the filter of how much profit can we make, regardless of how much we're potentially exploiting our people or exploiting the planet.
And that leads quite nicely on to you wanting to give your employees 100% of the company. Is that right? And you transition to becoming from the workers becoming entrepreneurs within the company. I was a bit unsure how that would work.
Okay, so that's something that's really grown out of the whole accreditation process of B Corp. It got me thinking about my future. I'm getting closer to 65. I'm the wrong side of 60. And so I was thinking about how I transitioned the ownership of the company. I own the shares in the company alongside my brother and one or two other family members. And did I want this to remain as a family business for the next generation? The next generation are all interested in other things. I don't want to lumber them with this monster of a business that I've been creating. But what I have got is some great people working within the company. And I mean, the other alternative is you sell your company to a third-party investor. So you get a venture capitalist come in and buys your company, or you do a trade sale to another company in your sector. So there's lots of ways you move your business on if you want to sell it. And having looked at all the options, I decided that I wanted to turn it into 100% employee-owned company. So effectively, you set up an employee ownership trust, and then you transfer all the shares into that employee ownership trust. And then it's very similar to the John Lewis model. So John Lewis Partnerships is run through an employee ownership trust. Now, what I've done slightly differently to a lot of people that do transition to employee ownership is we've issued share options to all our staff. So all our staff a couple of months ago received a letter explaining what we were going to do, explaining how many shares they've been allocated, and that was based on the length of time they've been with the company, and their position in the company, their role in the company going forward. So it's quite a complicated spreadsheet that we put together. They've all been told how much those shares could be worth in 3 years' time, because we're not transitioning to become an employee-owned company for another 3 years. And we've put together growth plans for the businesses for that 3-year period. So effectively, we've set out a business plan for growth for our Rotatech business, for our construction business, and for our architects practice. They all form what we call the Gusto Group. We've issued share options to everybody. We've got about 150 staff across the different companies, and the value of those share options will be dependent on the value of the business in 3 years' time. So we've now got everybody in the company aligned with getting a benefit from this company growing over the next 3-year period. And that's quite empowering. So I sit down last week with the guys from working on in the factory at Rotatech. We've got a factory in Worksop, we've got a factory in Newark, and we have a open discussion about how the business is going to be valued in 3 years' time, about how they can impact that valuation. If they reduce the amount of scrap, as a business, we produce quite a lot of scrap within our manufacturing company because the nature of what we do, sometimes products don't come out perfect. So we then have to very quickly jump on that, find out why, and make sure we're not then producing another piece of scrap. And that does happen within the business. And that's something that the guys on the factory floor can absolutely get hold of and control and make a difference. And once people start to understand that that is going to have a direct implication on their shares, because every bit of scrap comes straight off the bottom line, that's lost profit.
Yeah.
And when you value a business on a multiple of the profits of the business. So everybody starts to understand how their actions and the way they work with each other is going to impact the value of those shares in 3 years' time. It's quite empowering, and I hope that over that 3 years we'll see everybody within the company turning into entrepreneurs. It's seeing opportunities, how around what they can do within the business to make that work better, because that's what entrepreneurialism is about. It's about seeing opportunities to do something better. And it doesn't matter where you sit in the company, we can all see opportunities to improve.
And so that's brilliant, by the way. That's quite, like you say, it's very empowering for the employees. It gives them a bit of purpose and alignment within your goals and your vision. And like you say, if they just see a bit of scrap, we go, we're doing a job, doesn't really matter. But actually, if they're getting shares in the company going, this is my business now, let's pick this up and sort it out, And so do you have like board meetings with the employees to kind of raise points, what they think they could do better and that sort of thing as well?
Yeah, so all that is being set up at the moment. So we've just literally started this process. So we had the meetings with all the staff over the last couple of weeks. We're now going to set up regular monthly meetings where we're sort of calling it from the broom to the boardroom. So instead of everything just having to go through the sort of management structure, what we've realised is that there are people on the factory floor and guys on the sites that do come up with good ideas, but perhaps they don't feel those good ideas are being listened to. So why not just allow them quickly to speak straight to the managing director, to me, to the board, and have that conversation with us, so that we make sure that those ideas are coming through and they are being impacted, dealt with. And then eventually we'll have an employee ownership trust board. So that we don't become an employee-owned company for 3 years, but we'll get the structure all in place so that in 3 years' time, we've got everything set up and we are operating like an employee-owned company before we become one. And I think that's quite an important thing to do because, you need to change the culture of your company, and that doesn't happen overnight. You don't change the culture of anything overnight. It takes a little bit of time.
And so your role as chairman will be to make decisions and that sort of thing. Will there be one person as acting as a chairman still to just kind of make that final decision, or is it based on like a voting system? How would it work in terms of like, because people have different ideas, right? So if they all come around collective different ideas, for example, how would it work in terms of like that last decision to go forward?
We've still got a board, so you've still got a management board for the company. So effectively we don't change the way that we manage the company in terms of I'm the chairman of the group. We've got individual managing directors for all the companies. We've got a group managing director who the individual directors report to on a day-to-day basis. And then we've got our senior management teams within the company. So we've got a structure that you would recognise in any sort of well-structured company. But then what we will have is we'll have an employee ownership trust. They're almost like the shareholders. They will own the company, but they don't run the company on a day-to-day basis. But they will have a lot of influence over the way that we're running the company. They will be able to fire me in 3 years' time. They could make a decision to say, no, we want to get a new chairman in. Now, we will have a process to do that. Yeah. And hopefully they'll see that I'm going to continue to add some value to the business. But in theory, that's the relationship. So you're empowering everybody to have an input into making the business work better, and we need to have that really good flow of information that comes back up to the board. But they're not running the company as such, but they're making the key decisions as to who we recruit, and they're almost, as a shareholder board panel would do with any company, they put forward their shareholder recommendations, and if they feel the company's going in the wrong direction for something, then ultimately they can make a decision to remove the managing director of the company.
Excellent. So 150 people on board, that'll really improve the business growth. But do you have any plans of where you want the focus and direction of the company to go in the next few decades now, or is it kind of just continue to do what you do?
Well, we've set our vision. Our vision is a sustainable future built through partnerships. So we want to do a lot more partnership work across everything that we do. So on the house building side, we want to partner with housing associations. We want to partner with local authorities. We want to partner with landowners. So we want to do much more partnership work. And we have this sort of vision of a sustainable future. So we want to try to make sure that a lot of the work we do is building that infrastructure for what a sustainable future should look like. But we also need to be commercial. We've got to make money along the way. So it's finding that balance between innovating with the right type of partners that have the similar values and similar aims to us, and can sort of see the same future. We wouldn't necessarily want to partner with a company that just wants to bang out as many houses as they can at the lowest cost, without any thought of the impact on the environment and on the local community. That wouldn't be our partner of choice. So we're having conversations with companies that have got a similar ethos to us. I sat down with the president of the John Lewis Partnership. John Lewis Partnership employs 70,000 people. They want to build 10,000 new homes over the next 10 years. So the John Lewis Partnership sat on a lot of land. They've got all the Waitrose stores, and we've got a big property portfolio, and they've made it very open that they're planning to do a lot more housing development. So we met. I had a phone call with their president, and the head of property came out to Collingham to have a look at what we were doing, and also shared information and knowledge with me about how employee ownership works for them. They've been doing it for a long, long time. So, you start to sit down with organisations that have got a similar ethos to you. And obviously they want to work with somebody who's good at doing their job, but they like the fact that they've got a similar mindset to them. And that's really what B Corp's about. It gives you that instant, you know when you talk to another B Corp company,
credibility,
thinking about the same things as you're thinking about.
No, that's excellent. So the last question I want to ask you today, Steff, is what advice would you give to someone who wants to start and scale a company?
Do it. Do something. Take a small step. Don't necessarily sit there and plan, every bit of detail for your future. You've got to just take a little bit of a leap of faith. Even if you're working at the moment and you want to do a side hustle, get that side hustle going. Because if you don't learn, you won't grow. So you've just got to start doing stuff. Learn from other people. Talk to other people. You'll be amazed, how many people just don't think that other people are there to help them. Or they think that people are going to nick their ideas. That's one of the biggest things with people. They think, oh, I've got this great idea, but I daren't tell anybody because they might all nick it and run away with it. Well, it absolutely, the chance of that happening is so small. It's such a small risk because other people haven't thought about your idea. That's your idea. They can give you support. They can talk to you. They can talk from their experience. If somebody wants to come and talk to me about, the trials and tribulations of setting a company, obviously I've got a lot to draw on because I've been there and done it. I'd say get out there, be open, have lots of conversations, start to turn the idea into reality through the conversations that you'll have with people, because unless you start to talk about it, it doesn't become a reality. And then start to do something about it, even if it's a little step. If you're going to if you want to do rent a property out, or if that's what people are looking to do, or you want to do a renovation, well, try to find a fallen down property to renovate. Help your friend renovate their house. Just do something that starts your business journey. And then once you start to get on that journey, you'll just find that one thing will lead to another and opportunities will open up. Go for it.
Excellent. If anyone wants to reach out to yourself, Steff, or the team to have a look what you're doing on site, or just to follow you on socials, where can they find you?
I'm not that active I'm on LinkedIn, so if they want to follow me on LinkedIn, that's probably the best place to do it. So it's just Steff Wright on LinkedIn. As a company, we actually need to do more around our socials, and I think that's something we're planning to do. Just follow me on LinkedIn. I'll put a few posts out on LinkedIn. It's not
appreciate your time.
Better place than Twitter at the moment.
That's right, yeah. Well, appreciate your time, Steff, and thanks for watching, everyone, and I'll see you in the next episode.